Hello, long time no see again. That's because we've been busy with crap as winter starts rolling in. Everything that's urgent before snow flies is top priority. So some of the fun stuff gets pushed off to the side, and some of the immediate stuff gets pushed off to the side, sadly. Anywho, so last you'd seen this guy, it was wearing different wheels. It was rolling around on, it actually might be that exact set that's on the Gold EXP right now. I think it is. Yeah, it was on those exact wheels. Now we got extra 3 wheels on here. 15-inch aluminum tires. They're a little wider, a bunch lighter, and then with less sidewall, they're a lot more planted to the ground. It's not too much flex as compared to these guys here. Much more. So, you know, anyone with these cars, if you have a chance to get 15s, that's definitely the way to go. On the inside, you know, so that was that. We went out, changed all the wheels, went through the brakes. Those were A-okay. Someone had put in fresh calipers and drums. Or, sorry, not drums, calipers and cylinders, the rear cylinders. And then we changed out the gauge cluster. Yeah! So originally this guy had the El Cheapo cluster. This guy. Ick! Boo! Ick! Yeah. So much better. But I do have to change out the surround. This is the surround that came with the car, and you can see it's nowhere near fitting into place. Because each of these clusters is made for, or each of these bezels is made for the specific cluster. So let me go grab the one that's for the full instrumentation. Okay, and here it is. So, tell me the difference. That's right, this section here by my pinky, it's a lot thinner on the full instrumentation. And it's because these gauges, they come down a lot further so they can clear more lights up top. So the full instrumentation cars will actually have this kind of arch in the center here, while the cheapies have them straight across the bottom. So we'll grab the cheap cluster here, set that in my lap, and we'll kind of lay this over it the best we can. And by doing so, we're able to see a couple flaws here. So if you're looking to swap out clusters, the following is what you're going to need to keep in mind. You are going to have a lot of fitment issues here. As you can see all the screw holes and a lot of gaps all around. Yet it just looks terrible. But then also the bezel here, it doesn't hug the plastic as good as it should. The clear lens, and that's an issue we have with this right here. So this will get yanked out. The proper one will go in its place. Another thing is on the cheap cluster, these corners, they come in pretty far. On the full instrumentation, they do not. So we're going to set these aside. We'll show you what else we had done. But it is a working project. We're not completely done with anything here. It's just, pardon me. Things are coming along a heck of a lot better. That's the good news. So I went through, cleaned out the entire HVAC box. That's why the glove box is off. And we tried out the blower motor. Blower motor works. And while I looked at the resistor pack and measured each of the resistors and the thermo switch, we're still getting nothing on low and medium. We're only getting the high speed out of the blower motor. So it's something up either with the resistor pack, indeed, or it's something up with the switch. But the funny thing is I had gone through both, so I need to go through and make sure we're not having issues with any of the wires going to each of those. So what we'll be doing is there's the resistor pack is right next to the motor. It's on the top side. I can't reach it from within here with all this stuff in the way. So we'll have to pull out that resistor pack, unplug it, and then we'll hook up our multimeter and see how many volts we're getting to each section of that resistor pack. And it's what I call a mechanical resistor. So it's just a coil of wire. It looks like 3 different sizes and lengths of slinkies on that resistor pack. And it's that coil of wire that creates the resistance between the coil and the diameter of the wire itself. But the thing is if any of them is corroded, it won't conduct you. But they all tested fine with my multimeter, so we have to go in there and make sure the wires are good. I have to stick a probe in each of them, make sure there's voltage going to all 4 or 5. I think there's 5 contacts there, and we have to make sure voltage is going in and out of all those, no problem. So we got that to deal with. But when I went in and cleaned out the inside of the switch, I removed this red bezel, and the whole black control system flopped out in front of me. Someone had tried removing it before, and they had messed a lot of stuff up. So this whole black thing, and not the red. The red comes out with these 2 vents. The whole black control panel, the black panel itself, it's attached to a number of switches, between vacuum switches, electrical switches, and then this is just a blend door lever. Someone had reefed on this so hard, yanking it out. There's supposed to be 2 screws on the bottom. They left those in, so the bottom tab broke off. So the only thing holding this whole control panel in is mostly this this red trim bezel holding the bottom in. But at least I am able to screw it in with the 2 top screws as designed. And then it didn't end there. They had also sheared off the mounting peg and screw for the fan speed switch. So I had to do that. That's when I went and cleaned out the switch, tested it and everything. Then I reassembled it with new screws. I made sure that was thoroughly secured. They had done the same thing with the rear defrost switch. So I went and did that too. New screw. Did a little manipulating with the pin so it holds in there fine. Because with both of these, there's 1 pin and 1 screw. So then the whole switch is kind of like a cartridge that locks into the first screw or first pin, and then you screw it in down on the other side. It's kind of like a set of breakers in your house. You know, the modern day. They're kind of designed so that you stick one end in, and then the other side just locks when you push it down. Basically the same thing. And then this switch needed cleaning up bad. None of these positions would do a dang thing. Or I should say they wouldn't conduct any electricity. But they appear to be routing the vacuum where it needs to be. And that's really the big thing. The switching aspect, I was able to clean that out. And then the vacuum aspect, I was able to clean out. But this, the whole actual switch was loose from the whole panel because, again, someone had been doing something they shouldn't have done without proper research or consulting me or both. And they ended up breaking the mount that mounts this whole switch unit to this control panel. So right now I got it held in with a zip tie since the other side was still mostly intact. But the next time this gets any kind of service, we're going in with a soldering iron, and then we're going to be doing a lot of plastic welding, just so that I can omit my zip tie and we'd be a-okay. Part of the HVAC system meant service work meant that we were able to, because we had cleaned it out. It was full of mouse nests, absolutely full, as per frickin' usual. And I think the mouse that was living in there had got stuck between the fuse panel and the dashboard. Kind of got his head stuck in there, and then he died there. So I loosened up the fuse panel, pushed that up, drug that mouse out, threw him out, and we were able to carry on with that aspect too. Then we moved up here, the wiper switch and everything, that had done absolutely nothing. So I went through, tested it, and yep, every single aspect of the switch was not passing current through my multimeter. So I went and I cleaned out all the insides with electric contact cleaner. Now it all works. And we'll put the key in the car and you'll be able to see all this work. It's awesome. There wasn't any issue with the blinker. The horn I don't think works. I do need to look into that, and it's a little sticky. That could be part of the problem, but someone's definitely gone and replaced this not too long ago. Same with the ignition switch. So that's good news too. The bad news though is that even though it's already been replaced, it's already failed. You know, see it trying to pop out like that. So not until I get a new one are we going to put on the red column trim pieces. No point in doing that. Another issue we had was someone had this rear wiper switch out at some point, and when they did, they had broke a bunch of the clips that hold it on, so now it no longer holds on to the connector. That's an easy workaround. I have no issue fixing that. The problem though is there's two loose plastic pieces inside of this guy. One is the little white plunger for the swash button, and that clicks in. There's two floating copper contact tangs here, and they just float. On each end is a little breaker contact. So when you push down this wash button, a little peg comes through, pushes down on one of the two contact strips. And then the rocker switch itself works the other one. Well, there's the rocker switch, and like I said, there's a center button. You can actually see me push that in. Oops, there we go. It only does that in the run position. But yeah, a little white plunger is what goes inside of this. But whatever goes on this rocker switch itself is long gone, so I'll have to fabricate something new. It's real thin slit of something. I imagine it looks like a triangle or maybe a cam lobe. A cam lobe, sorry. Anywho, project for a different time. But we also have to switch this switch over onto the new bezel for our new instrumentation. When I put the new cluster in, I made sure everything worked. I also made sure that all the pinouts were correct, from the cheap gauges to the spendy gauges. And funny enough, for 1981, if you wanted to change out one of these clusters for the other, it's a direct swap. That is great freaking news. I think it's the same with 82. 81 and 82, they'll do a direct swap, no problem. If you have an EXP, your story is going to be different, okay? If you have a 1982 EXP or LN7, your pinout is going to vary slightly. I will include a link in the description of the correct pinouts as they are for the car, as they are relevant for the car. So you'll see in the link there'll be a Google Drive spreadsheet. When you pop that open, make sure you hit the view in printable form or whatever, so that it's more easily legible on your phone. But they'll have the correct pinout for every single year of these cars that I have factory wiring diagrams for. So that's all but like 3 years, I think. And you need to go through in there and make sure that the cluster you're getting can work in the car that you have. That's a big deal, because there's one single connector for all the electronic features here, and it's composed of 18 pins. In 1981, all cars have 17 out of those 18 pins. I think it's even number 18 itself that's just empty. They leave it empty. They just omit it. It's a provision for some sort of aspect that none of these cars have. None of them use the 18th pin. At least not as far as these early ones go. Again, refer to my wiring diagram. So you go through, you look for the year your car is. There will be a long list here, and it's left to right is the year: 81, 82, 83, 84, all the way to 1990. You got to pick your year. So if it's a 1987, you go, okay, 87 is an EXP or Escort. At that point, I believe they're all the same. Anywho, you find that, and yeah, 87 Escort, okay. And then you'll have the whole list of pinouts. And then you need to compare that to whatever cluster you have. If you have an 83 cluster, you have to go back over, start fresh, left to right. 81, 82, 83. Okay, it's an 83. Oh shit, it looks to be an 83 EXP cluster. Okay, that changes things. I need to make sure that this pinout matches this pinout. If you change your pinouts so that they match, you'll be completely fine. But you're going to have to do that depending on what years you're looking at comparing. 83, for instance, is unique to itself and only itself. If you want to put a different year cluster in an 83 car or an 83 cluster in a different car, you need to change the pin out. It is the same story if you have an 83 full instrumentation or the 83 cheap instrumentation. You need to change the pinouts for it to go in the car. Same thing if we're looking at 83 EXP to 83 Escort. You need to change the pinout for it to go in the car. Okay, please get that through your head. This is very important. Now after you've done that and you've ensured it all works, you're free to put it in. And everything will work as it should. The gearing for the speedometer is in the transmission. It's not in the cluster, it's in the transmission. So any of these speedometers will plug into any of these cars and you won't have any issues whatsoever. It's the electronics you need to worry about, okay? Good. So we'd gone through and I made sure that the full instrumentation for 81 is the same as the cheap instrumentation for 81. And it was. But there are two pieces missing if you're going from the cheap gauges to the spendy gauges. Now the cheap gauges don't have a temperature gauge, and they don't have a tach. It's fuel. I think it's fuel on the left and speed on the right. Yes, fuel on the left, speed on the right, and then a few less lights. So you have to go through, and your engine needs to have a temperature sender. There is a fan switch on the thermostat housing, and there's a temperature sender either on that same thermostat housing or elsewhere on the head. You need to make sure that your car has that, otherwise you're not going to get a temp rating. That's the deal with this car right now. It doesn't have a temp sender in it. I need to add one, and then I'll be able to have the gauge. But the radiator fan still works because that's a separate switch, not a sender, okay? Let's get that taken care of too, okay? And then coincidentally, 81, it has, like I said, that whole 18 pin out thing, it's got a provision for the tach, and whether the gauge cluster has a tach or not, the car does for 81. The years that follow, not quite the same story. Again, please refer to my Google Drive spreadsheet before asking questions here, okay? Do that first. And then afterwards you're okay. So I went through, I tested all these, made sure they all worked, and then I went through and I changed out all the lights for LEDs where I like having LEDs. So the bulbs in the entire cluster, it's a type 194 bulb. I think I have one floating around down here. I do. It is this, oops, not my ring. It is this type of bulb. It's a, I wouldn't even call it bayonet style. You just stick it in and you're golden. But on the back of the gauge cluster, there's a number of these little black receptacles. So what you do is you turn it left about 30 degrees, pop it out, change your bulb. Oops. Stick it back in. And then suddenly someone says, Bob is your uncle. See, just like so. Now you have to do a few things here. So let's grab this so I can show you, illustrate it to you. We have to do a few things. If we're converting the LED, we have to make sure we test out the whole thing before we put the effort of snapping all back into place. Why is that? Well, LEDs are polarity sensitive. That means if you can hook them up to a battery, and if you have the LED on the battery backwards, it won't light up. That's how that works. because it's LEDs. The abbreviation is light emitting diode. A diode is an electronic component that only passes current in one direction. If you try passing current through the other direction, it doesn't happen. Just doesn't happen. It's as simple as that. Pretty cool stuff. So anyways, if you put an LED in backwards, it won't light up. So you have to have your cluster sitting in your lap, put the LED in these little bayonet sockets, stick it in. You also need to make sure all these contacts are clean. If they're starting to turn green or gray or anything, or black, you need to clean them. I recommend 800 grit sandpaper. That'd be good. You're welcome to use fine steel wool if you want. Just be aware if you leave metal shavings on here, which is very easy to do with steel wool, you can end up shorting out the circuit. That's a risk you end up taking. So I recommend just the very fine sandpaper, and or if you want, you can use like a little bit of polishing compound on a rag or an old sock. You can do the same with contact cleaner. Try spurting a little bit of contact cleaner in there, wipe it off with some rag or sock or whatever. So once you've changed out all of these, you hook it up to your car's harness, and then you turn the key and try out every single function. Make sure that all the lights are lighting up, and make sure that all the electronic features you remember working are still working, okay? That's important. So let me show you what that looks like here, because I had went and changed out most of the lights for LEDs. The only ones I did not change out for LEDs, hey, there we go. So there's my blue backlight. The only lights I didn't change out for LEDs were my the high beam indicator. I think I left that as a plain bulb, and same with the turn lights, the turn signals. And the reason for that is I put LEDs in my nice blue 82 EXP in all of the light sockets. And the problem is that when you have a very bright, when you have a bright enough LED in the turn signals or the high beam indicator, they are so freaking bright at night. So once it's dark, they're crazy freaking bright. They're so bright, it hurts the eyes. You have to drive like this so you're not staring at them. They are literally brighter than whatever oncoming traffic's can throw at you. It's brighter than their high beams, which is ridiculous. So I had just put a normal bulb in there. It looks like that. Let's turn all this stuff off so I don't have to remember about it later. And then putting white LEDs in for the backlights will have a unique effect. They will go from a teal color to a blue color. So this is with an LED. That is also with an LED, and on the right side I have a still normal bulb, because that bulb is different. But that's does not appear to be lighting up either, so it doesn't really matter. So if you put an LED in there, it's going to be blue. And the reason why, bear with me as I try to find the backlight circuit. Alright, that's the turn signal one. I bet it's up here. It's these ones. Okay, so inside, hey, there we go. So inside the cheap cluster, there's just a clear blue plastic lens here. So when you shine a light, well, when you shine a normal light bulb through there, because normal bulbs like these, they have a yellow tint to them. They glow yellow. So when you put it behind a blue screen, it comes out teal. But LEDs are typically white. So when you hook up a white LED to the backlight of these guys, it is blue. Just straight up blue, like you see in there. So that's what you need to be keeping in mind. Just tips from the trade, tips from a guy who knows better, because he had made a mistake before. So yeah, we had gone through pretty much all the electrical on this thing. I made sure all the lights around the car are working. I have one burnt out bulb up front. I got a new one I got to stick in. We also had to change out the gas tank. This one actually started getting holes in it, and all the rust and debris on the inside was clogging up the hard lines, the metal fuel lines that go down across the length of the car. So I had to clean out those, and that sucked. Had to go through a couple different fuel pumps because the electric ones I were getting weren't working. The mechanical one in this car was already bad. That's why we had to do the swap. That was mandatory. That's also my preference. If you're doing anything under the hood, spend the extra 20 minutes and put an electric fuel pump in there. Thank me later. And then after you do that, take that mechanical one off, pitch it, take the push rod for it, set it to the side or pitch it, whatever you want. Plug the hole, walk away. Do your car solid. You don't need fuel leaking into the car at any point. Yes, I know you'll see in the comments that there is a telltale drip hole. That is true. However, if that becomes clogged in the event that the rubber diaphragms fail, and rubber likes to turn back into kind of like a petroleum, like tar or jelly, it'll fill up that hole. And now you have fuel going into your engine. And that's just something you fight with any machine this old. Any machine this old is prone to doing stuff like that, and it's detrimental for the life of your engine. It'll grind it to a halt real fast. So we do that. We also went back through the carb, make sure we didn't have any vacuum leaks, which involved removing a lot of vacuum lines, replacing a lot of plastic lines with rubber hose. We'd gone through, I even had to adjust the valves. That's another thing too you guys need to keep in mind. If your engine is running for a little while, but then it keeps stalling at, say, at 5-10 minute mark, and you can't get it restarted until it cools off, that's something you need to be looking into. Is pop open the valve cover and check all the torque. Check the torque of all the rocker arm nuts. If you have a 1.9, they're going to be rocker arm screws or bolts. You need to make sure those are somewhere in the 12 to 18 foot-pound mark. Refer to your manuals as necessary, but it should say 12 to 18 foot-pounds. Do that, and you have to set each one at top dead center compression. So it's a little slow, but it's as easy as unplugging the distributor, putting the key in the ignition, blip it, walk around, do whatever cylinders at top dead compression, and come back inside, blip it again, do the next cylinder. I mean, it's only a total of 8 rocker arms, each with only one bolt or one nut. Easy. And then the valve cover itself is only about 8 little bolts, and the air cleaner is one banjo nut. Crazy freaking easy. The question is why? Well, the reason why is because the valve train in these is just, we'll say aggressive. It's aggressive on the cam and lifters inside these cars. It seems the camshafts are not as hard as they need to be, and the lifters are probably a tad on the soft side too. But anywho, what happens is, yes, all the lifters in all these stock cars are hydraulic tappet adjusters. So in theory, you should never have to adjust anything underneath your valve cover, but that's simply not the case. When the cam and the lifters and the valves get enough wear, pardon me, when each one of those gets enough wear, that last adjuster has to adjust more and more and more and more. And usually what will happen is the valve slowly sinks up into the head as the valve and the seat wear. So if you imagine we imagine our cylinder head here and our valves that go up and down inside of it, as the valve naturally wears in all engines, okay? Any engine with a valve, so every non-two-stroke basically, will wear into the head further and further and further. That means the tip of the stem is going to sit higher and higher and higher underneath the valve cover. And what happens is, as that goes up, as the valve goes up, the lifter plunger here that sinks in and in and in. But at some point, it runs out of adjustment. It's a spring-loaded top, much like a clicker pen. So spring-load. This is the lifter, okay, and it's got a spring-loaded top right here. And as your valve goes up and up and up, this naturally goes down and down and down, just trying to compensate so that you're not hearing a lot of clicking and nothing's having excessive lash or bind so tight that the valves hang open. The problem is it runs out of adjustment. When it does this, when it bottoms out, that plunger bottoms out, your valve is now going to hang open because it's got nowhere else to go. So every 20,000 miles, you should really be popping open that valve cover and making sure that none of these rockers or none of these lifters are getting bottomed out. Because if they bottom out, what will happen is the whole reason why we have lash adjusters is not only for wear, but from heat cycles. As everything in the engine heats up, anything warm expands versus things that are cold typically contract. As everything inside that engine expands, and that means your lash between items gets tighter and tighter and tighter until they just start touching. The problem is if it's with a lifter, once this bottoms out, that valve is going to keep expanding. But if it's as high up as it goes, eventually the head of it is going to come away from the seat, and then you lose all compression. And that is why some engines, with high miles typically, or just terrible adjustment between the two things, it will start and run fine when it's cold. As soon as it gets warm, it stalls out, and it doesn't matter how much fuel you give it or how much air you give it. And you can even have perfect spark. It's not going to run simply because it doesn't have the compression. No compression, no combustion, okay? And then in the realms of carburetors, if there's many instances in which there can be not enough compression to have enough vacuum to draw fuel from a carb. In motorcycles, I got this V45 Sabre over here. In motorcycles, at least these performance ones, usually once you dip below the 110 to 120 PSI mark, somewhere in there, if this Honda V4 has less than 120 PSI, that cylinder in question will never draw fuel from the carb. And it doesn't matter how much of the carb you put your hand over, it's never going to draw fuel from that carburetor. It doesn't have enough compression to have enough vacuum to draw any amount of fuel out of that carburetor. It's just how it goes. So that's an issue that kind of face in here if you're not keeping up with maintenance. So do please keep that in mind. But after we did that and took care of a bunch of vacuum leaks, did a little bit of fine tuning, this thing's running pretty much a-okay. For some reason, I don't have the keys in here. Otherwise, I was going to fire that up for you. Unless I have them on my key ring here. Maybe I do. Nope, no I don't. These are for the blue EXP over there. That's a shame. I was going to fire this up and you could see the wipers run and everything else, but that's all right. Someday soon we will get into clock diagnostics, because when I first started driving this car a couple weeks ago, the clock was working. And after I went through, did the cluster, and I did a little bit of work on this fuse panel. The big issue I was having was the blower motor was not getting any kind of voltage or current. Because a very common thing in these fuse panels is the little connectors for the fuses. If you imagine this pen is the fuse and my pinky is the fuse panel, you stick the fuse in there. But what happens is the female connectors inside there for the male fuse, if someone changes any of the fuses, that female connector up here will be like this. It'll get a little stuck on the tip of the male fuse, and it'll pop out the top, which is great, because then whatever circuit that female connector popped out of is not going to receive any kind of power whatsoever. So that's exactly what I had happen with the blower motor. But I had to go through all of these because it turned out the resistor pack had some debris on it, needed cleaning. The flywheel motor needed cleaning. The whole HVAC box is full of mouse nests. That needed cleaning. All of the switches inside the HVAC control panel, they needed cleaning. And then we were finally able to work our way to the fuse panel and make sure that that was getting and sending current the way it needs to be. As well as checking to make sure the fuse was still good. But yeah, otherwise, I think that was about everything. So I just need to go through and make sure that I didn't bump something, say, like underneath the dash that would make the clock no longer work. And it's the circuit. I gotta look through the wiring diagram, but it says that the current runs through the gauge cluster, so it powers up the backlights, and it comes out of that, goes up to the clock, so it can power that up because it runs the same time it has backlight power, just like the gauge cluster does. If you turn the headlights on, that goes dim instead of full bright. So it goes through there, it goes into here again for the backlighting, and it I don't think any of the radios had any backlighting. Goes down here, backlighting for the gear selector indicator, and then that's it, I think. So somewhere in there that had lost its current, and it's not the backlight one because I can turn the thing on. Everything else lights up fine, even what comes in after this, because it's all done in series, not parallel. So it's the main power feed that's just not sending. So I need to check into that, because I believe that's hooked in with the radio. So if that doesn't have power, the radio doesn't have power. Vice versa, I think. I need to double check that. Crud. Oh, so issues. What do we have for issues still? Well, we'll hop out of the car and I'll show you. There's not much inside here. We changed out the fuel tank and the sender for a known working good one, and for whatever reason my fuel gauge is still not working. Even though this gauge works, I'm not getting a reading from the back half of the car. So we need to lower the tank and make sure that the connector is still on there correctly and it's gripping the prongs decent. And hopefully we'll get a fuel reading after that. The rest of the car, I need to change out the two front tie rods. We found out doing the brakes at this front one. The inner tie rod on the front driver's side is just toast. It's freaking gone, man. I do have a intact lens to put on here, so we'll do that. Oh, crud. I also changed out the headlights, and they work much better than what was there. One of them was the bulb was bad, and on the other one, the sealed housing was no longer sealed. The other big issue I found out, this windshield may or may not be original. It's a car light, which is what the factory glasses are. So that is a factory replacement, or it's original to the car. The problem is, you can see it's got a bunch of cracks in it. Some of those cracks are letting in a little bit of cold air. But the bigger thing is the sealant around the windshield is crap. It does absolutely nothing. When I drive this thing down the road at 55 miles an hour, it feels like I'm driving without a windshield. That's just nice. It's freaking cold. And that's not too fun, especially since the blower motor only works on full blast. But there's a lot of riffraff inside the HVAC system that I still need to get out of there. So what I have to do is come out here with a key, stick the key in, turn the car to accessory or run, whatever, and then turn the blower motor on each of the vent settings. Get all the crap out of there, and then vacuum the car again. Otherwise, that's about it. I changed the front wipers. I have to get around to doing the rear. I'm not too concerned about the rear because right now the switch isn't working. So we'll get there when we get there. And when I cleaned the wiper switch up front, the wiper squirter started working, and that was great. I also had to reclock these. This one was clocked so far down it was hitting the trim. And we'll see what it's like with that one. I may have to do the same thing. And now, pro tip, when you look to get wipers for these cars, they say to use 18s. And no, do yourself a favor, get some 20s on here, because this is as far up as the 18s go. And that's quite inadequate. This here is the swatch. So you're missing out on 4 inches of height on the top of glass. I mean, realistically, it's only 3 because of the black sill there. But you're missing out on 3 inches. So might as well get 20s or 19s if you want. But I definitely won't be getting 18s again. We're going the 20 route. There's an inch on each end and then some, so why the heck not? Otherwise, I think that's about it. This guy has been a peach. We do need to put an exhaust on it. Still, it's open header, so you fire it up and it's and it stays like that until it warms up, settles down, and then going down the road, cruise is kind of quiet, but. Oh, and I need to get the cruise control working. So that will be a separate video in itself, diagnosing and servicing cruise control, because it's going to be my first time doing it. I have not done that on any of these cars yet, because cruise control is so rare. Most of my cars don't have it. So there's one car with it. That one doesn't. That one doesn't. That one doesn't. That one doesn't. This one didn't. That one didn't. And then the 3 cars that 2 or 3 cars that I have in there do not. So it's just a rare feature. So we will slowly be going into that. We'll also find out what's involved in converting the standard wipers into what the EXPs all came with from standard. Intermittent wipers. So the stock is a lot bigger because on the tip here it's a knob. So inside that stock is a potentiometer. So we will have a separate video on swapping that and servicing that. Anywho, I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. Yeah, not much else. I need to get a screw for a little Allen slug screw for the set screw for this, or it's got it in it. Oh crap, it's got it in it. Well, that helps. I gotta take this door panel off, fish the mirror remote adjuster through that little bezel surround, and then put the door card back on, and then I can actually adjust my driver mirror. And there's not too much after that. Not much at all. And someday soon we will be replacing the window run channel in this thing. They're toast. They're gone. They've been long gone. So it makes a lot of noise going down the road. You hear nothing but right next to your shoulder. It's very dreadful. And then not only that, but it also lets in a lot of cold air. Another thing I have to do, I see, is glue down that trim piece. Arg, am I right? When you go from having an EXP to having an Escort wagon, you sacrifice a lot of simplicity. you end up doing a lot more labor and getting a lot more parts than you normally would. Some of it's a 2-door versus 4-door thing. Some of it's really an EXP versus Escort thing. Like changing out the headlight buckets, that sucked. We had to take out these 2 full bezels, these entire plastic surrounds. That wasn't too bad, but it kind of sucked. I mean, it doubled the workload. So in the EXPs, it's 4 screws for the stainless steel trim ring around the headlight, and it comes out. The headlight comes out, put a new one in, done. In the Escort, you have to do that, but first you have to get this old headlight bucket bezel thing off first. So it's pretty annoying. Oh well, but yes, look forward to more videos on this. Again, I'll have links to what I talked about in the description. Feel free to ask any questions, and hope to see you later.